This podcast is sponsored by Pearson, the team that brings you the Self, Goldman Fristo, and now the new PPVG5 and EVT3. Enjoy a special 10% pre-publication discount when you order these vocabulary tests before December 31st, 2018. Learn more at pearsonclinical.com/PPVG5. Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined, as always, by Chris Bugay. How you doing, Chris?
This has been a fantastic week, Rachel. I've been waiting all week to tell you about all the cool stuff that's been happening.
I'm so excited. Hit me with it.
All right. So first, you remember how I had Eleanor come stay with me? We did an episode with her, one of the people from Australia that we've had on the show.
Yes.
Well, this week, I had someone stay with me for 4 days from Canada. And he has also been on the show. It was Sean Pearson, who is an AAC specialist up in Calgary. And he came and stayed with me for 4 days, palled around, went to different schools and saw some different things. And we brainstormed and chatted and just had a great time. And my wife is like, how often are we going to have these AAC people coming in? Like, as often as they want. Who wants to come? AAC people, I get to learn from them and they get to see what we're doing in our neck of the woods. And it's just great collaboration. So it was a really exciting time. Sean was a great person to have here. And Sean, myself, and Chris, who was also on the podcast, when we did that agreements episode, the AAC agreements, we're taking that show on the road and we're going to be at ATIA this year. We're doing that kind of a live session. We're going to try and do another AAC agreements there and try and get people to come up with what are these things that we agree upon? What are some sort of standards that we agree upon that should be something we consider in every case for AAC?
I love that. And I actually forgot about that episode, but that's a really great one. So if you guys haven't listened to that, definitely go back. It was Chris, Lucas, and I, and we all came to the table not knowing what everyone else's agreements were. And we kind of shared live. So that was a really good one.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that Sean got to see, and one of the first times I've ever done this, was we worked at an elementary school where we had a technology resource teacher. Now they're called IFTs, Instructional Facilitators for Technology. But they're like the technology coaches in the school, right? They work with integrating technology in every classroom. They're not specific to special education. And we met with this technology resource teacher to talk about how we could take robots and put them in an autism classroom and teach kids core vocabulary with the robots. And so then as we were talking, like we were coming up with this plan, we were playing with the robots and we was like, why don't we just go do it? And we walked over and talked to the autism teacher and she was like, yeah, here. And she grabbed a kid and pulled him out in the hallway. And I sat down with his, in this case, he happened to have Lamp Words for Life. So I sat down next to him and started modeling on his device while someone controlled the robot from an iPad. And so when he would hit turn or when I would model turn, the robot would spin around and go wee, 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 right? And make these fun noises but spin in a circle. And then we'd go, go, and it would go off straight. And then it would stop and wait there for a second. And I'd say, play. And all of a sudden the lights would start flashing, and then the kid started doing it. He started pressing play and go and turn, right? And watch the thing spin around. And so it was this really engaging, fun moment where it was like, so many other kids in the school get to play with robots and program them and do coding with them. And now this kid was starting to down that path, right? First, it starts with his communication device, just giving the robot really verbal commands. But then we've already set up our next meeting. We get back together and say, okay, how are we going to get him coding now? Like, how can we get him to drop the little blocks together to make the robot go and turn and play, right? And so it's just super exciting day. Like, we all walked out of that day like, yeah, that we just killed it today. We just taught a kid vocabulary using robots. That's what it's all about.
And I love the impromptu, right? It's like, okay, let's just like grab it and go. And I feel like it's just so great when you have a teacher that's just down for whatever comes up. And I think that a lot of times we get stuck, both speech therapists and teachers and sometimes parents, we have this idea in our head, like, oh, I'm going to go into my session and I'm going to do this. But I think the best sessions are the ones where you just kind of follow, a child's motivation and a child's lead and what gets them excited. And I think that that's exactly what you guys did. And that's the best kind of therapy.
Me too. Me too. The kind of off the cuff, off the top of your head, make it happen. I mean, we did do a little planning just to make sure we knew how the robots would work and how we could kind of organize the session so that one person could control the robot. So there was a little bit of planning, but when we weren't planning on actually doing that lesson today, we were talking about, talking to the speech therapist, talking to the autism teacher another day. And then we just said, why not? Why? Let's just do it. Let's just try it, So something else happened though, Rachel. That's not my only cool story. So the other cool story is that, Sean was with me for 4 days and I was like, 4 days with Chris is going to be like too much. Like you got to go be with somebody else for a day. And because not every day is playing with robots, you know what I mean? Some of it is just working and answering emails and doing stuff that we'd be sitting at a table together all day, not doing anything fun, playing with cool apps and cool kids. So I actually asked Sean to go visit with one of my other colleagues. Her name's Katie. And so Katie was kind of picking Sean's brain about touch chat. And then when I went to pick him up at the end of the day, we all got in a conversation and she was talking about how she was trying some strategies for students with CVI. And I was like, well, you're not going to believe this, but just did an episode with Aaron Sheldon. That was one of our more recent episodes. And so you should, check it out. And so that was really cool because I got to share the podcast. Katie had already known about it, but she didn't know about one of our more recent episodes. Part of that conversation is she was using this low-tech system where she had a Xerox box top, okay? You can picture that, this cardboard box. And she had put, in this case, the homepage for Lamp Words for Life. The kid that she was talking about with CVI, they were thinking of trying Lamp Words for Life. But then we had a conversation about, are the icons too small? But this is what they were originally trying, right? So she had Lamp Words for Life pasted on the inside of this Xerox box, right? Just the home screen. And then she took a mask over top of it that was black and white, and she cut out certain parts, certain words of this mask, right? So just follow along with here for a second. She has this black and white version of home screen of Lamp Words for Life. She cuts out a number of words. She takes that black and white piece and she places it over the colored piece within this cardboard box, and then she gives that to the student. The idea being that your communication device is in this box. And we're going to have this contrast in colors between the black and white symbols and the ones we're focusing on today, which are the colored symbols that are sneaking out through the windows that she has cut through. And I was just like, that's amazing. I would have never thought to try that. It's to how to provide a high contrast between the words you're working on in the targeted session and the other words that are on the device. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. My first thing is, did you take a picture? Because I feel like I would love to see a picture of that.
Sean did. I'll get it from him. Yeah, I was like, oh, he's taking.
Well, maybe we can add that to the Facebook group, because I feel like that would be awesome to see. I definitely was following with what you were saying, but I feel like I'm a visual learner, as most of the kids that we work with are too. But I really like that. I like that idea of the different kind of targeting vocabulary, right? And I also like the idea that that's big. Because I think a lot of times we don't really know what a child is capable of, because sometimes they have access issues and sometimes, things are too small and they can't, see the little tiny icons. Honestly, sometimes I can't see the little tiny icons.
Right.
So I feel like that's really cool. And I am so envious of these therapists and these people who are just so resourceful. They just they have this idea and they're like, all we need is like a Xerox box, some laminated sheets, some duct tape. And I'm like, they like MacGyvered this system or this thing to trial. And it's really admirable.
Yeah, we were brainstorming afterwards and we were talking, not even afterwards. We were brainstorming, the three of us together, and which is awesome, right? You get three speech therapists together talking about how to make this communication system better. And one of the things that Katie said is she's like, I'm thinking that maybe version 2 of this would be painting the Xerox box black so that there's a black background that this whole thing is sitting on, or possibly yellow so that the whole thing I'm keying on, this whole thing is bright and standing out to me. I was like, yeah, these are great ideas. Like, you never know, but I guess it'd be a good thing to try.
Absolutely. And I think that, that's half the battle sometimes is just being open to trying different things. And sometimes they don't work and it's like, okay. But I feel like that act of trying different things when you have a tricky case that doesn't, kind of fit, maybe one of the molds that a lot of kids fit into. I think that that's the name of the game, is like not giving up and just trying a bunch of things that, might work.
Now, there's something else, Rachel. So afterwards, Katie sends me a text message and she says, Chris, I downloaded the episode and I'm listening to it now. It's awesome. Thank you so much. This is just what I need. I'm going to share it with my teachers. Awesome. She goes, but I can't leave a review, or I don't know how to leave a review because I have Google Play. And I think you're talking about leaving reviews on iTunes. And I was like, yeah, I even thought about that. So first of all, Rachel, how are we doing?
Guys, we have 83. And I'm getting a little nervous. We only have a little bit of time left. We're in December 2018, circling, to a close. And we still have 17 reviews to go to get to 100 reviews before the end of the year. So if you haven't, please go on iTunes, leave a review. Please you can send me a direct message if you're having a hard time figuring out how to leave a review. I already gave a tutorial to my mom, so I'd be happy to walk you through it. You do have to go to the iTunes store, which I think kind of throws people off a little bit. Maybe we should do a video. Maybe we should do like a screen video of how to do it.
I think there is one. I think Luke, our producer, put one in the Facebook group. I think it's like maybe did he pin it at the top or something like that? I'm pretty sure that
you're correct, actually.
But it occurred to me, Rachel, that when Katie tried to do it with her Google Play, is that could be why we're close, but there's not everyone is an iTunes user, Yeah. So there might be a whole contingent of people out there that are listening to the podcast that are Google people, or they're listening through some sort of other service. So in which case we might not get a review for them, but let us know. It would be great to know if you went to the Facebook group and said, yeah, that's exactly it. You keep telling me to leave an iTunes review, but I don't have iTunes, or I don't use iTunes. I use Google. We'd love to know that too.
Absolutely. I want to share a review from Sharon, who says, I listen to quite a few SLP podcasts on a regular basis, but as a pediatric travel therapist, this is the one I have found to be most delightfully fascinating, research-based, client-centered, and useful. I love to listen to this podcast throughout my day as I travel client to client because I typically learn an illustration or piece of research or new strategy immediately needed in my session that day. Thank you for the rich and interesting learning experience. Please don't stop. So, man, I just love these. They just make me so happy to hear that the talking and the discussions that we have on here are really relevant to people.
Yeah, me too. It makes you know that what we're doing is really helping. Now, Rachel, the Facebook group has been hopping lately.
It hasn't ever. I went on there, I forget what day it was, and I was like, whoa, so many people are posting and giving us episode ideas, and there was a really, really interesting discussion. So one of our listeners, she says, I would love to hear a discussion on the podcast about how private speech therapists can better partner with school-based therapists during the assessment period when different devices are being tried with our students. A huge challenge that I'm facing right now is that students are being matched with devices without any input from the school team and school SLP. I don't doubt that there's good evidence that they're being matched with the device that's appropriate for their strengths and needs. All settings have their go-to tools and devices that we try out with our students, but it seems that parents just default to what the private therapist recommends, as if that is somehow superior to what the school SLP would like to try. So I just thought this was a really interesting conversation. And ironically, Chris, you are in the schools, I'm in private practice. So I think that this is definitely a discussion that is worth bringing up on the podcast.
Absolutely. So let's do it. This is such a rich conversation that I think we're about to have, and that as evidenced in the Facebook group, because there's lots of comments in there. Part of this, I think, is going to also bleed over to, we've been talking for a while now about doing an entire episode with no interview, just about trialing and assessments. And that's sort of at the heart of what this is. Not exactly, but this question is about selecting the right communication system. And what the person is asking is, who gets to make that decision, and how do we collaborate together to make sure it's the best decision?
Yeah. And I think from my perspective and my experience, I'm always happy to collaborate. I love connecting with other SLPs in the schools. I think that the best approach is a collaborative approach. But a lot of times parents are coming to me because they're not getting what they need at school, or they are second guessing what's happening at school. So it's sometimes hard to get the parents kind of on board with a collaborative approach. And that's just a challenge that I've had to deal with in my practice. So how can we as private practitioners, address parents and try to support this collaborative approach. Because I'll be the first to tell you, sometimes parents come to me and they're like, I don't know what's happening at school. We're here because we need you to, do the assessment. Or so there's this idea that, maybe they're not happy with what's happening at school. And rightfully so with some of my clients. Honestly, I've had a lot of clients who have been denied access to an AAC device because they're not ready. You guys can't see me right now, but I'm using air quotes. So I think that that's part of, what's going on. Parents know that technology can help their child communicate, and they're just not able to do that through the school route, so that they have to find a private practitioner. That's not always the case. And I would just really encourage both private practitioners and school SLPs, let's just open the dialogue. The first thing I do when I get a new referral is I ask, are they getting services at school? Are they getting services with another practitioner? Because I need to talk to both of those people. And I think any part of a good assessment is talking to the clinicians that are already working on the case, and I think that that's where we start in the assessment process, always talking to and collaborating with other people on the case.
There's so much to unpack here. So first of all, we've been having the same conversations in a school level where the private speech therapist will go off and make their own choice and then not collaborate with the school's team. Or in some cases, it's a device has already been chosen and the private speech therapist has now added a whole bunch of fringe vocabulary, let's say. And the school's like, what are you doing, private therapist? And so all of that seems to be solved with communication. And so one thing that I'd like to kind of point out when we talk about all of this is that if you took all of the situations throughout the entire, world, let's say world, all the situations with kids using communication devices, how many of them are in the camp where the private speech therapist has gone rogue or the school is not collaborating, and how many are actually working collaboratively? Because I find that the majority of cases with my involvement, the school-based therapist and the private speech therapist, we usually do work collaboratively together. That's not the rarity. That's the standard of how there's these oddball cases where it doesn't work right. And I try and keep that in mind. Where it doesn't work often takes much more of your time and energy. But when it does work right, when you're collaborating together, it doesn't stick out in your mind because it's not a problem to be fixed,
Yeah. And I think one solution to this is, who is the bridge between school and private? It's the parents. And so I think both parties, both private practitioners and school SLPs, they can encourage a parent to have a collaborative approach. And I think that that's something that I do during every phone call that I have with a potential new client or an assessment or whatever. I'm pushing the collaboration. And oftentimes parents are surprised. They're like, oh, you'll talk to the school SLP? And I'm like, I don't know what your experience has been thus far, but yes, of course I'll talk to that school SLP. That's I have to talk to the school SLP to see what's going on. So I think that we can both come to the parent and really push that collaboration, because I think oftentimes, parents don't even realize that's possible. They just think of them as these two separate entities, there's private and then there's school. This idea of collaboration maybe doesn't even come up in their mind.
So let's get deep here for a second, because the words talking and collaboration, I think, need some definition. What does that actually look like? Because what I think some people might hear when they say, talk to the private speech therapist or talk to the school-based speech therapist or collaborate with each other means get on the phone and argue with which side is right. Dig your heels in and try and prove to the other person that what you think is right is the way you should go, right? And so how can we avoid all of that? And I think in some cases, assessments actually lead to that. And let me explain that for a second. You go to the public school, and the public school, in order to get a device, might need to say, we need to do an assisted technology evaluation or an AAC evaluation. They get somebody to come in and do that evaluation, and they write up a report. And at the end of that report, there's some sort of suggestion or recommendation that says, this is what we think the system should be. And then that report goes to the IEP team, and the IEP team then sort of says, yes, we agree, this is what the system should be. That's, I think, probably the most common way to get communication systems. I could be wrong, but I think that's kind of the standard. Now let's take it from the private route. Same idea might happen is right. Well, okay, private person, the private person might think the student needs a communication device. They go off and do an assessment. They write up a report. Maybe they try 3 things. They submit that to the wherever they get the funding source to, and then they get a device that way. And in each case, we have not talked to each other. And in each case, we've ended up with a report that means we are digging our heels in saying, now I've already decided what I think is right, and you've already decided what you think is right, and now we have to defend our positions. So the way, in my mind, to prevent that from happening is the moment someone brings up the question, should this kid have a communication device? The very next question should be, well, is the school involved, or is there a private therapist involved? And then the very next thing we should do is get everyone in a room together, even virtually if you have to. I mean, because logistically, sometimes that's hard. When I say everyone, I mean private speech therapist, school speech therapist, assistive technology person if there is one, AAC coach if there is one, administrator, pretty much the IEP team. You get them in a room together and you do feature matching. Rather than digging in and saying, well, this is what I think it should be and this is what you think it should be. Let's come up with a list of what the students' needs are and then have a conversation using this sort of framework of feature matching to help us guide the conversation. I don't know. What do you think? In every case, let's start with getting people in the room together.
I completely agree. I mean, I think that the first step is, talking, but the ultimate goal is collaborating, right? And I think part of the problem is we're also busy. So it's like, and especially, in the schools, it's like I have 70 kids on my caseload. Like it's hard to make these things happen. So obviously we're talking about an ideal situation. Something that I think about is how can we use technology to make our work more efficient? And I have 2 suggestions. One, I think that just like you mentioned, Chris, having a virtual meeting, totally possible in 2018. It's super easy. They have free apps like Zoom and all these platforms that you can use to have a virtual meeting. You can record these meetings so that people who aren't able to attend can, watch. One thing that I really love is I have a calendar set up where people can book phone calls with me. So there's a lot of different apps that you can use. One's called Calendly. Another's the one I use is called Acuity. But basically, you put in your schedule. So if you're a school SLP, you have time from 12 to 12:15, and you have another gap from 1:30 to 1:45. You can put your calendar in instead of this back and forth, which takes forever. Sometimes it's like either you're calling back and forth and leaving voicemails, or you're emailing back and forth trying to find a suitable time. You just say, I would love to set up a conversation. Here's my schedule. For whatever reason these times don't work, please let me know. I'll wiggle some things around. And people book calls. And it's so easy. And it's just like, it pops up on my Google Calendar and I'm like, okay, I have a phone call with this SLP and I have a phone call with this other SLP. And so it just makes things a lot easier, that simple act. So I would encourage, our listeners who are feeling like, sure, Rachel, like sounds great to just talk to all these people, but when? That can be a really great time saver. And I've just noticed in my practice, it's just totally transformed my day. I actually, because I'm in LA, I only talk to people when I'm driving. So I have my wireless or my hands-free headset going, and I only have times available for when I'm driving. And if those times don't work for somebody, it's fine. I can pick up the phone and call them at a different time. I have availability, but for the most part, people just, I email them a link and they sign up for a call.
Yeah, exactly. I think another piece of technology that might help there is some sort of shared document. So again, if you're working through a feature matching chart together, well, one idea is to project it up. If you're all in the room together, obviously project it up on the wall. But if you're not all in the room together, you could just be on the phone. You don't even have to see each other, and you can at least be sharing the document. So you're still looking at the table that you're filling out, where the first column is all the student's needs and all the considerations about the student and the environment and the task that we're asking the student to do. That's what you might put in the first column. And then the next columns over that you're looking at in the shared document might be the different tools that you'd be considering. Should it be application A, application B, application C? And then you kind of put check marks next to each need to see which one comes out in the wash as the one that maybe is the one you want to try first. And that could be your assessment.
Yeah, I think something else that I try to always keep in mind is not everybody agrees with what I think, right? And so I think that's part of the problem is we all come with different ideas and sometimes we get stuck in those ideas. And I will be the first to admit that sometimes I'm like, no, I think this is a better idea. So I think that one, we need to come to these collaborations and these meetings with an open mind. I think the feature matching, it really puts the emphasis on the child. And so I think that's great because it's like, okay, here are the features this child needs. Not like, here's a system I know the best, or here's the system, that I think is good because I trialed it and it was the best. So I think that personalizing it to the child by feature matching is really a strong approach. The other thing I think just we all could probably have a nice reminder in is just, you get more bees with honey. And so I approach every collaboration. Really, my goal is I want you to have a good conversation with me. I want you to like me. And, I think that we can all do so many great things if we can all just get along. So I think that part of it doesn't even have to do with speech therapy. It has to do with just being open, listening to another practitioner and, validating the things that they're seeing and their ideas. Even if you don't necessarily agree with them, there has to be a shred of something that you're like, yes, I totally agree with you. Sometimes people just need to feel like their ideas are heard, and then they're more willing to, move in a different direction because they don't feel like, so defensive that it's like, well, my idea was shot down. So I just feel like I need to put my fists up and defend it.
There's a lot of ego in these conversations, right? And that's what you got to kind of check at the door and be willing to compromise and understand that maybe it's not going to go the way you think it necessarily needs to go. And you can't win them all necessarily. But maybe if you went in with the idea that it wasn't going to be a fight in the first place, you don't have a predetermined notion of what the answer is going to be. You're going in with a bunch of questions and we're going to come out together with answers, right? It's coming to a shared understanding. That's really the point behind having a meeting like that.
Absolutely. I go into those meetings and I refuse to fight. Sometimes people try to pick fights with people that refuse to fight. And so I'm just like, I try to keep it real cool and calm. And I'm like, it's okay. Because at the end of the day, it has to be a conversation with the whole team. And sometimes we can kind of go back and forth to people about two different ideas. But I think at the end of the meeting, it's about what do we all collectively think? And so, if somebody disagrees with me, I just think it's a better strategy to be open and figure out why, and just say what you know and what you think. And I think that we can find a compromise. Most people can find a compromise if they're coming from the right place.
I think there's something else to keep in mind with all of this, and that we're sort of painting the idea of the ideal situation, right? This is how we'd like it to work, right? This is how we want it to work for people. Some of the things that came out in that Facebook group discussion, and again, I highly recommend you go over and start and just check it out, is that I realize that some people are coming from a different place. They have different experiences. They've had different trauma or turmoil in the past that influences their decisions. I think one person in there was saying how they had to move their whole family to try and find a school district that was willing to support their child in the way they felt they needed to be supported. Let me put it this way, Rachel. This is my wife used to tell me this. I don't know if I've shared this analogy before, but me and my analogies. My wife would stay home with the kids while I went to work, and then we'd swap off in the afternoon where she would go to work and I would stay home with the kids, right? And we'd have this maybe hour overlap where we'd be together, and she would be really short with them. And I'd be like, hon, why don't you just be more patient? They're young kids. Just be patient. She'd be like, Chris, you're seeing the last 5 inches of this 500-mile rope, right? I've been patient all day long. You're coming in at the last end, just seeing the last little bit. And sometimes I feel that same happens in these conversations where I have come in to have or the school-based therapist or the private therapist are coming into parents that have already expended so much of their rope, and so asking them to just be patient or just let's try and come in with an open mind, is not as easy for them because they have already been carrying this weight for years in some cases, And so I just think I wanted to empathize with that standpoint, is that it's not easy what we're asking people to do, to continue to be patient when things have gone wrong for them in the past.
No, absolutely. And I think that it's just my intention with this, discussion is to just remind all of the clinicians out there that some of these parents have been through the ringer, and just being sensitive to that. They've been denied, and all they want is what's best for their child, and all they want is to hear, their child communicate, and to hear what their child has to say, and to support their child in the way that they think is best. And so just being sensitive to that, I think it's just an important reminder. We kind of all come with baggage, and we come, to the table with all types of things, but just remembering that at the end of the day, we're here to help. We're in a helping profession. So just keeping that in the forefront. We could talk about this, I feel like, all day long, and maybe we should dedicate an entire episode to just this, kind of bridging the school private gap, because I think there's a lot of really useful resources that we can share and strategies that we can come up with. But we have a really exciting episode. So we're part 2 of our ASHA series. I was hustling at the ASHA booth, doing lots of interviews, and today we are talking to Jenna Rayburn Kirk, who I absolutely love. She was on the podcast already. She's fantastic. She stopped by our booth. We chatted. We probably laughed and giggled a lot more than we talked speech therapy, but we had a fantastic time. And then Marlene Cummings, who I absolutely love. I actually met her for the first time at ASHA. She was introduced to me through Rachel Langley, who I also love. And Marlene was presenting at ASHA, and she's doing a lot of work similar to Jill Center and Matt Bod with communication partners, and kind of changing the paradigm through which we think of AAC. It's not this expert model where an AAC specialist comes in and is like, here's what to do, and then, kind of flies out the door. But really, how can we coach communication partners ongoing? And so it's just, we had a really amazing conversation. I would love to have her back on the podcast to talk at more length and in more detail about, what her strategies are and what her experience has been. So I'm really excited for that one. And then last, we talked to Matt Hott. He hosts the SpeechScience Podcast, and he wasn't able to make it at ASHA, but he did call in while I was at the booth. And so we just chatted back and forth for a little bit. If you guys haven't listened to the SpeechScience Podcast, it's fantastic, and you definitely should give a listen. Matt has the best radio voice. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
Oh, totally. He's an old radio personality, I think. So yeah, he's definitely got the voice.
So without further ado, let's hop on over to the ASHA interviews. Okay, well, I'm here with Jenna Rayburn. We're at ASHA, and she was so nice to stop by our booth. We just aired her episode, which you haven't listened to. You have to go listen. It was fantastic. Jenna, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I listened to the episode in the airplane on the way here. It was so kind of weird. I was listening to myself lull myself to sleep. It was super weird. I got the alert right when I was catching a 6 a.m. flight. So of course I'd been up since 3. So I was like, this is great. And then about the time it ended, I fell right asleep. It was perfect. And I woke up in Boston.
It was the best lullaby there ever could have been.
It was so weird and good. It's so weird to listen to yourself.
It really is. So I listened to all the episodes, and it's just funny. Sometimes people will observe me listening, and they're like, "Is that you?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then I explain I have a podcast and I listen to it. It's really funny. But I'm so excited that you're here. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing here. You're at the SLP Bloggers Table, which is fantastic. It was really fun. I was just over there, and it's popping off over there.
Yeah, it is so fun to come to conferences like this. We did our first ASHA conference kind of as a group of individual bloggers and sellers and TPTers, teachers pay teachers, in 2014, and that was so different because it was hey, here we are. We think we're going to do this thing. Actually, we're already doing it. We think it's cool. Does this fit with ASHA? Do you like it? We had no idea what we were doing, and we had to educate. There's a lot of things that are new to our field that are like that, and ASHA is a great place to do that. Here's what we're doing. What do you think about this? Give us some feedback. And now in 2018, it's a lot different. People are using social media, they're using the internet, they're blogging, they understand websites, and they're using their resources that they can instantly download. So it's a really different scene. And there's still people we're explaining ourselves to, but less. And now it's more oh my gosh, it's so cool to hear and see from people who follow us and use our stuff.
Exactly. And I feel like teachers pay teachers has exploded.
It's crazy. Yeah.
You know, it's really, if you are an SLP and you don't know what teachers pay teachers are, like are you hiding under a rock?
Yeah.
Because
how are you surviving? That's the question. As issues within our field are slow to resolve, as they always are, caseload, workload, what kind of kids we're servicing in this school. I was listening to a conversation earlier about dyslexia. Like, are we servicing that? How are we going to do that if we already have 80 kids on our caseload? So all those issues are happening, then what happens to your lesson planning time, your resource time, all that kind of stuff? It goes away. So this is the solution. I've already tried this idea, couldn't find it at the big box store companies, the big wigs who have the big booths here at ASHA. I couldn't find it, so I made something for my student and then figured out a way to make it for you, and you can download it and use it that same day. It's so cool.
It's really,
thank goodness for technology.
I know, and it's just amazing how we can all share materials in such a way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, what was that site so long ago, right when I was starting practice. Speaking of speech, or was that what it was?
And what about like Boardmaker Share? I always use that too, right? You're like, let me get my Boardmaker CD and put it in so that whatever I download will work from Boardmaker Share. And I'm sure those still exist and are still helpful. Yeah. But the quality you get when someone is selling a resource, of course, is going to be so different. And when you download, I just uploaded some new AAC resources. Actually, they're like book sentence strips companions. So the first page you get are the evidence-based links, and you get the editable symbols. You can put any symbol you have in it, and that's so different than when you go to Boardmaker Share and you're stuck with the symbols that person used for that one specific book.
Exactly.
It's so different.
And it's so nice to be able to edit, because as we know, like, it's like from one case to the next, it's so different. They're on different systems with different symbol sets, and it's crazy. I was on an ethics panel earlier today, and Meredith Harold, who is part of the Informed SLP, or she started the Informed SLP, so she's very research oriented. She talked about how do you is it our role when we're creating resources to provide evidence, or is it that the treating SLP who buys the resource, it's their kind of within their scope to know what's research based and make that decision. So it's great to hear that you are including resources.
And doesn't it probably fall on both of us?
Exactly.
Really, of course, like everything, when you buy a published book from any content creator here at ASHA, there's probably one page in the front that talks about, okay, this matches visual supports, or this is visual modeling, and here's the research for that. But it doesn't tell you every specific new and updated research article that's been out in visual modeling since it was first published. We have to know the research too. I think it falls on both of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a good conversation to have, though.
It was, and it sparked a nice little flow of conversation, and I thought about it through the lens of my own materials, and I have videos on YouTube, and at one point someone had asked me about research regarding one of the things that I was talking about, and this was, maybe a year ago. And I thought, wow, you're right. Like, I didn't cite research, because I feel like I speak these things. I know these things so, it's like to my core, I can talk about, aided language simulation and core words and all these things, but I forget that the people that are consuming the information that I'm sharing, they don't have that foundation. So I need to kind of cite the sources. So then I, of course, went back and put the resources or the citations in some of the videos that we created.
And I think some of the things that are hard about that is, like, a lot of times, because if you're a school-based clinician and your principal wants to see the evidence that this resource worked. Like, in our field, we have research that supports strategies and ideas, but we usually don't have direct research on every little thing. Like, the exact articulation card is not researched. This photo of a frog for our blends is not been compared to another frog photo to see which one is going to create the most efficient generalization of the word frog. Like, that does not exist. But in a reading curriculum, that's how they sell those. They take a test study and they put kids through it, and then they say, okay, in 6 months, this kid went from AR1 to whatever the next reader level is. And that's sometimes what administrators are looking for. And you're not going to find that anywhere in speech therapy curriculum. But I think as people who are content creators, we have to think about that. That's what some administrators are used to looking for. And I think that's changing. I think there's a lot of value in clinical expertise and teaching expertise, and so I think that worldview is changing a little bit, but like everything, it's a slow change. So I think it's everybody's responsibility to be ethical in that, but you're also not going to find the frog research.
Listen, I think you're going to spearhead the frog
No, thank
research.
you. Pass. Hard pass on that for me.
Oh, no, Jenna? Not into the frog research?
No, thanks. The articulatory artist situation. I'm not getting into that. Articulation and picture drawing. And no, thank you.
No, thank you. You like the digital version,
I
right?
would rather hang out in the digital world, yes, where I just make it and I show you how it works for my caseload and then what evidence I have, and we'll work together to make sure your principal agrees.
Exactly. So have you seen any great sessions? Are you just in the exhibit hall, or are you heading
I've
to some
popped
of the
into
sessions?
a couple sessions. Yeah, what I can't believe is how big ASHA is this year.
It's crazy.
And the problem is that when I go to sessions, 5 minutes before, most of them are full.
Yeah.
It's been crazy.
The overflow rooms are overflowing.
The overflow rooms, once they asked me to go to the second level to find an overflow room, I was like, I think no. No, I don't think so.
Feels like too hard.
I'm going to find something else. So I saw a cool one yesterday about assistive technology in birth to 3, which was kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
None of the technology was really new to me, but the parts that were that were like good reminders to me were things with motor development and speech development and how those go together and the things you can look for. And I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, well, you don't really hear about AAC in, birth to 3.
No, it was kind of good. It was, and she was mostly focusing on those kids who are going to have, like maybe they have a chromosomal disorder, and you kind of know, okay, 70% of these children are nonverbal or non-ambulatory.
Right.
Why are we waiting till 4 to give them a power wheelchair, and why are we waiting to get them a communication option until then?
We need to start really young.
Yeah,
especially
and how they can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, Jenna, we're so thankful that you came and stopped by
Thanks for having me.
to have us again. I just feel like I can't get
I know,
enough Jenna.
we just talked, and it's really good.
Literally.
I'm going to
call you next week and the week
right.
after.
We'll just check in, see how the frog research is going.
Exactly. Well, listen, I'm so excited to share even more Jenna Rayburn with
Thank
our
you.
audience. So thanks for stopping by.
This is super fun, you guys. There's a sound booth in the middle of ASHA in the exhibit hall. I'm sure you'll go look up a picture after you see this.
Exactly.
Or you listen to this.
We'll definitely snap a photo. It's been fun. It's amazing that the sound quality is still good.
I can't believe it. I know. In the headphones it is, at least.
Exactly.
So I'm sure it will be.
Well, we'll see, right? Proof's in the pudding. All right, Jenna. Well, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm here with Marlene Cummings. I'm really excited. We're in ASHA 2018, and Marlene is presenting tonight, and I'm super excited. Rachel Langley actually introduced me to Marlene, and I am really pumped that she stopped by our booth, and I want to just introduce her and let her tell a little bit about herself and about what she's presenting on tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. I'm excited to be here. One of the things that I love about AAC, which is my specialty and my passion, is how we can spread the word, how we can build capacity in classrooms and in buildings and in districts. We cannot be the expert any longer. We have to really share the wealth because there's just too many students out there to serve. And so today I'm going to be presenting on what that looks like to move from an expert to a collaborative model. So it's not really all or nothing. It's looking at the whole piece, all the pieces, and figuring out where you need to be the expert, where you can collaborate with the team, and then where they can just take over and serve the students. And so tonight we're going to be talking about how we think through that. Are there people already in the district doing things like that? What's that mindset shift that we have to have? So I'm real excited to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. I don't even like using the word expert because that, has this air that I know exactly what to do in all situations and I tell you what to do. I just really think that we need to support a coaching model when it comes to the teachers and the other SLPs that we're working with. And I think that, the more we can do to shift the paradigm, the better. So my follow-up question to you then is, what are some things that we can start doing that actually do shift that paradigm? Because what's happening, in a lot of the classrooms I'm coming into is they just say, okay, Rachel will figure it out. It's AAC related. And, I'm like, no, that's not exactly how this works. So how do we kind of spread that awareness?
So one of the things we've been doing is we provide a foundational series, pretty much basic AAC, that to create that shared knowledge with the teams we're working with, because we discovered that with AAC there were lots of terms and thinking out there that was very different than we expected. And so we do the shared knowledge, the foundational series, but we've also implemented something called job embedded professional learning. And so we go into the districts and they choose the goals that they want to look at and progress through that year. And then we go out 4 to 6 times and we do a coaching mentoring model right in the classroom with the students. And so we're not directly serving the students, we're supporting the team. And we have seen huge gains. And that's one of the ways we've been able to shift the mindset so that we truly are collaborating.
Yeah, so Jill Center and Matt Bod, they're coming back here for an interview. I've wrangled them in. Do you use their framework?
In fact, they're coming to present at Oakland Schools in December. And in fact, Jill just recently asked us to do one of the blog posts for USAC. And so that's our team talking about job-embedded professional learning.
Awesome.
And so we use lots of their strategies as well as others.
Amazing. I think that anything that we can do to kind of just, like I said, shift that paradigm is really, really important. For our listeners out there who are clinicians, maybe they're AAC consultants in the schools, is there any quick strategy that they can start implementing to change the paradigm of expert versus collaborative model? Like, what are some things that people can start doing right away in their practice?
So some of the focus that we have, especially in our professional learning, is we always try to support a core vocabulary approach so that we can get more unified language available rather than having the teacher have to learn 7 or 8 different systems. Now, we know that we want those individual systems available, but to have that set of core words that they can get used to and use in their instruction. We also use aided language input, so we use different models. The other thing that we talk a lot about is direct vocabulary instruction, because teachers are really excited about being able to do that systematically. So the collaboration comes with the speech paths coming in and then the teachers being able to take it over. And those strategies have worked really well for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. So for anybody leaving your presentation tonight, what's the one takeaway you want them to walk away with?
So we're going to, during the presentation, we're going to be filling out a form where they're going to be choosing actions. And so I want them to be able to leave with what they are going to do next. So what they've already figured out, their culture, what their current status is, and what the next steps are.
I think that's genius. Every call I am on, any type of, meeting I'm a part of, I always end with an action step. I think it's so important because we have all of these great ideas, and if we don't think through that next step, it's just like, okay, what now? How do I put this into action? Then, it's easy to it floats out of our brain and off of our priority list, and it's gone. So I think that's so important, actually. I'm thinking through the presentation I just gave last night, and I'm like, I don't know if I went over. I always have takeaways, but I feel like an action step is such a good idea. I actually just presented at a conference in Los Angeles, and it was about apps and autism, not specific to AAC. And I had an action step list because I knew that I was going to give 40 recommendations for apps to try, and I'm like, that's way too much. I know parents are going to be like so overwhelmed with that. So I was like, listen, pick your top 2 and download them, pick one routine and embed it before dinner time or after dinner time, and keep it simple, because I feel like that's when you see the most success with carryover and generalization, is when you make it approachable and it's not overwhelming and daunting.
Absolutely. We talk about being fed through a fire hose, and it feels that way in some of the conferences and sessions. And so we really encourage people to break it down, to be very intentional, because that's the only way change is going to happen, is if we do step by step, and we can't take it all on. And so when we do our professional learning, we have people take one action with each category or focus that we have and move forward with that, and then prioritize those so that they can truly accomplish something by the end of the year, which which they feel great about, because sometimes we don't even know what we did during a year because it's so hectic and busy, and it's like, did I do anything? And yet they pull out their action plan and they're thrilled that so many things were accomplished.
Absolutely. I feel like you blink and the school year's over. And you're like, did I just do that? Did that happen? Which is one of the reasons that I love, Jill and Matt's work, is because I think that baseline is so important. See how far you've come. And I think that it's something that it's a skip that we often we overlook. And it's such an important piece of the puzzle. And it motivates you to keep going when you see where you've come from, and constantly checking in on, wow, I didn't even realize, that was my starting off point. Like, look how far I've come. Because when you're in the day to day, you can't take a step back and kind of look big picture. So, Marlene, thank you so much for stopping by. I'm so excited to share all of this on our podcast with all of our listeners. Good luck with your presentation tonight, and we'll have to have you on the podcast for a full episode.
Well, that would be great. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We're live with Matt Hott.
Rachel, how's it going all the way out there in Boston? I am so sad that I am not out in Boston with you all this week.
I'm tired, Matt. I have to be honest. It's day 3 of the conference, and it's been a whirlwind. It's been amazing. So many great speakers here, so many people doing amazing things, but I'm tired, and I think everyone here is a little tired.
So my question is, how many super duper bags are you walking away with this weekend?
Listen, I'm anti-super duper bags. I have to be honest. I see them, I cringe, but they're everywhere. They're actually a little more muted this year than normal. I think there's less bright colors. I mean, they're still pretty bold, if you will, but I think they're more muted than I've seen in the past.
I do actually enjoy a super duper bag because they are kind of waterproof, so they always were nice to throw my science experiments in for the little guys, but I get it. So what has been your best moment of ASHA this week?
Well, honestly, I feel really excited that I was able to present. So I was I presented on Thursday night, which was awesome, just AAC and autism. And then yesterday I had the privilege of being on a panel with a bunch of awesome boss ladies. Mei Ling was the moderator, and we talked about ethics, which sounds really dry and boring, but we really brought a fresh perspective, and we really tried to talk about things like technology and how they impact our ability to maintain our code of ethics while we're creating digital content. So it was really, that was the highlight for me, is being a part of that amazing panel. Actually, at the end of our presentation, someone from a retired member of the Board of Ethics was in the back. It was an older, regal-looking man. He raised his hand and he was like, I have a comment. And we're like, oh no. And then he went on to say, how impressed he was with our presentation, and he was intrigued by the topic, and he just gave us a very flattering compliment. So that was the highlight for me. At first I was like, oh no, have I said something unethical? But luckily he was impressed.
That is awesome. So when I went to Denver, there was a giant blue bear in the convention center. Is there anything that is the that we could all be talking about at ASHA this week?
No, not that I've seen. Luckily, there's not that this year. But I will say this is one of the biggest ASHAs there is. 18,000 people are here, which I think is wild. That's a huge amount of speech therapists. So it's quite full in the Boston Convention Center.
Now, did you get to venture outside of the convention center, or have you been inside all 3 days?
I ventured out last night. So Thursday night I got in. I flew in. I got a 6 a.m. flight out of LA. I was, making a mad dash to the airport to get to my talk by 6:30 p.m. And then again, I spoke on Friday. And so last night was my big night out. And, I found myself at a karaoke bar, and now I'm feeling really tired the next morning.
So, Rachel, my question then, I guess, is when do you jump on the planning committee? When are you going to join an ASHA planning committee?
Oh man, you know what, Matt? I got a lot on my plate. So like, I'm not sure, like maybe 20 years from now, maybe things will slow down for me.
Hey, I'll make a promise. If you do it in 20 years, I will sign up to be your co-chair. How's that sound?
All right. We'll make a plan 20 years out. I'm in.
Now, will you be going to Orlando next year?
You know, I was thinking about that, and I probably will. I've been to the last few years of ASHA, and it's just such an amazing opportunity to connect with people, especially because I have an online business. It's so great meeting people who I have met online, and I feel like I know really well online. To meet them in real life is just really exciting, and I feel like the networking component of being here and being around, you know, a ton of other SLPs who are doing amazing things is motivation to go to Orlando. Not to mention the weather. Boston, not so good. It snowed the first night here, but I'm excited. I'm excited for some warm weather in Orlando next year.
Well, if you go to Orlando next year, I've already convinced my wife to let me and her, we're going to go down to ASHA.
Yes.
We make plans for a Talking with Tech SpeechScience live broadcast. How's that?
Oh, I'm so in. Yes, I am excited. I think the more we can get a bunch of SLP podcasters together, the better. You know, we've been having so much fun here doing live interviews and Facebook Lives, and it's been really exciting. And everyone's stopping by, like, what's happening? Who's recording a podcast? So it's been really great. And SpeechScience Tech, Talking with Tech, you know, combo live session sounds right up my alley.
Okay, so my other question is, I know I'm not there physically, but have you seen my face over by the headshot photo booth?
Listen, I've been getting your texts, and I'm like looking frantically for that face. So I promise you this, I will, after we hop off this recording, I will search tirelessly for your face, and I will try to take a selfie. I can't find it. We can't find it. But you know what? I'm not going to stop looking.
She sent me a picture of it. It is over where I guess you get your professional headshots taken.
Okay. This is good. I have some intel now. Okay. Headshots, pillar, camera. These are keywords that I'm going to write down, and I will find it. It's going to be like a scavenger hunt for Matt Hott's face.
Well, Rachel, you have a wonderful time. Thanks so much for letting me call in and just, you know, serendipitously living the ASHA life through you for just 4 or 5 minutes.
Absolutely, Matt. As always, it's such a pleasure talking with you. Love the SpeechScience Podcast, so I'm excited. Whenever you say you want to hop on a podcast, I'm game.
Awesome. I will hold you to that. Thank you, Rachel.
All right. Take care, Matt.
You too. Bye-bye.
You're listening to the Exceptional Podcast Network.